one sure way to increase insulin sensitivity is exercise. That has been shown very, very solidly. Exercise increases insulin sensitivity, and that automatically increases your ability to switch over to glucose when you need to, especially when you're doing high intensity exercise. And then body composition, that's another thing you mentioned, right? Having high body fat content, and especially peripheral visceral fat content, that also increases risk of developing insulin sensitivity, because Dr. Ben Bikman talks about this a lot on insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance, on how the increase in fat tissues, either via number of fat cells or the size of fat cells, it leaks out these adipokines, which is, inflammatory signaling markers that creates the cascade of event that then cause insulin resistance.
Do you guys know how difficult it is to find a high quality supplement line that doesn't just destroy your gut? Most pre-workouts and post-workouts, or even like on-the-go snack options like beef jerky or protein bars, they're terrible for your gut health. They're full of xanthan gum and guar gums and fillers and artificial sweeteners, which disrupt your gut microbiome and lead to chronic bloating, constipation, diarrhea, and not to mention, when our gut is off, all of the other symptoms like hormone imbalances, thyroid issues, mental health issues, which is why I'm just obsessed about gut health. But anywho, I have not been able to find a good supplement line out there, and I had to cut out all of these fitness type supplements when I was really struggling with a lot of my own gut issues. Until recently, I found Paleo Valley. And Paleo Valley is one of the first supplement companies that hands down is incredible for your gut health, whether you're on a gut healing journey or you're someone who just wants to optimize your gut health and overall health. Their founder, Autumn, actually suffered with IBS herself. So she created this entire supplement line specifically to be gut friendly. And I'm not lying with you guys. Their whey protein powder, which is grass-fed and finished, gum-free, artificial sweetener-free, no issues, no bloating, no constipation, no diarrhea, no upset stomach, which is literally like the first time in my entire life that I've not had issues with the protein powder. And they even have super yummy grass-fed and finished beef jerky sticks, which are made with a collagen casing instead of the typical citric acid casing, which is terrible for your gut health. And if you want to try out some of their other products, they even have a bone broth protein powder. I love adding that into whether it's like my oatmeal in the morning or my protein shakes. It literally tastes like the Nestle hot chocolate powders, if you ever had those as a kid, which were not gut friendly. And then they have great supplements too, like their apple cider vinegar capsules or even their turmeric capsules, which are great for inflammation and gut health. So if you want to get a discount, you can use my code using the link in the show notes here, which is paleovalley.com/Rachel Scheer podcast. But all of that's going to be in the show notes. So check out the supplement line because, guys, you know me, I would not have this on my podcast if it was not awesome and gut friendly.
I feel like a lot of people don't know a whole lot about ketosis, even how the metabolism really works. Mm-hmm. And, my goal out of today's podcast is really for the listeners to be able to walk away with a better knowledge of how their metabolism works, what impacts their metabolism, some things that they can do to even optimize their metabolism as well too. And then what are some things that they can do to take more ownership over their health? Because I feel like a lot of people are suffering with metabolic issues, metabolic disease. And I feel like even the word metabolism is thrown out there so much, right? It's like, I have a slow metabolism, or how do I optimize my metabolism? And I'm not sure if sometimes that's even used correctly. So I'm hoping today we can debunk a lot of the myths.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always loved metabolism just from a personal point of view as well, because I grew up with a family with high prevalence of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So my mom's side has really high prevalence of diabetes and obesity. And then my late dad passed away from stroke like 20 years ago, and he had a heart attack before. And then my half brother also had a heart attack and passed away a couple of years ago. So the combination of that genetic factor definitely was not the best recipe for myself. And I grew up overweight. Not until I was in my undergraduate that I started exercising. I started learning more about metabolism, physiology, that I knew that there are things that I can do to change my lifestyle and change my body composition and change my metabolism, and eventually live a healthier life.
Yeah. And when you talk about metabolism, how would you explain that to other people? Is that just like how fast that they burn energy? What does that actually mean? Because that word is thrown out there so often, especially online with all the hacks about how to boost your metabolism and all of that.
That's a great question. I think let's go back to biochemistry 101, right? Metabolism consists of anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is where you build up stuff, you store substrates, you store energy. Catabolism is where you break down storage and create energy. So our bodies are doing metabolism at all times. We are doing both of these. It's not switching one off and then the other. It literally is doing both storing and breaking down both at the same time. And people are like, how do you do that? So our body is really good at getting signals from stimulus. And depending on our activity, what we eat, when we rest, our bodies will then get those signals and turn up anabolism or turn up catabolism and turn the other one down. But it never switches completely off because our bodies is constantly in the flux. So that's what I normally do when I teach metabolism, for example, give a lecture in university. It's always in a flux, and it's always interconnected. It's never a linear pathway. As much as we would love to simplify and oversimplify things and say, okay, glucose gets metabolized into pyruvate, into Krebs cycle, into oxidative phosphorylation, and creates ATP. It's never as simple as that, because once you put in fatty acid oxidation, then there is the random cycle. You increase fatty acid oxidation, you will automatically decrease glucose utilization, and vice versa. So that's metabolism as a whole, is how efficient we are in utilizing the substrates that we provide our body, or fuel or substance or food, however you want to call it. It's essentially the sustenance that we provide our body through nutrition, and how good are we in metabolizing it and creating the energy that we need for a given circumstance.
Yeah. So I'll even summarize a little bit for the listeners, and you tell me if this sounds correct. But what I'm hearing from all of that, which was awesome, but I know for a lot of my listeners, they're probably like, okay, I'm lost in all of the science side of everything, which, like,
I apologize.
You're an incredible researcher, but it's metabolism at the core is really how efficient you are at taking carbohydrates, fats, protein, the food that you're eating, and turning that into energy. And some people are very efficient at doing that, and some people are not so efficient at doing that. And that's what really we're talking about when we say, okay, you have a fast metabolism. That means you are very efficient at utilizing your food and turning that into energy, where some people are maybe not as efficient. Do you feel like metabolism is something that is really more genetic, or what do you feel like plays the biggest role? Because oftentimes it's so easily to blame, like, I just am born with a slow metabolism. I have a slow metabolism, but I know there's a lot of different factors that can play a role in metabolism. I would love it if you could share what some of those are.
I think genetic definitely plays a role in how our metabolism works, right? And the simple example is you look at Asians, right, for example. Generally, Asians lack the gene to metabolize alcohol, so they get the Asian flush or whatnot, or there are more proportion of Asians who cannot metabolize lactose, for example, who are lactose intolerant. So you can see the effect of genetics in metabolism in that sense. But at the same time, if we're talking about efficiency, it's always a spectrum, and it's always a a graph of normal distribution. It's never like high or low. It's never binary. So when we talk about efficiency, there are so many things that are not dictated by just genetics. In fact, and a lot of times people have shown again and again that they defied their genetic makeup by practicing, lifestyle interventions and lifestyle changes that makes them better at doing certain things and metabolizing certain fuel. For example, endurance athletes doing more cardio zone 2 really helps them turn up the fat utilization and help them tap into the fat storage versus the glucose storage, for example. So there are certain exercises that has been known to really push you to be more efficient at burning a certain substrate, a certain fuel versus the other. And then another example is when you give a certain food like ketogenic diet, for example, you really restrict your carbs. For people who have insulin resistance, they are already very bad at metabolizing glucose because they are resistant to insulin. So when you eat food, when you have high blood sugar, your insulin gets turned up because your insulin then sends signal to your muscle cells, for example, to pull in the blood, to pull in the glucose from the blood. So this is how our body maintain a healthy level of blood glucose. But for those individuals with insulin resistance, they do not have that response. They lack that response to insulin because all these cells are either, just resistant for whatever reason. Either they are just very full with storage. They're like, okay, the storehouse is full. I can't take in any more, stuff from the blood, and therefore I am going to cut off that responsiveness to insulin. And then giving these people really restricted carbohydrate kind of diet help them to, because then we know that their fatty acid metabolism is still normal or a little bit better, so they can still have enough energy, and then couple that with active lifestyle, better sleep, better stress management, then hopefully that can reverse their insulin resistance and increase their insulin sensitivity. So there are certainly, part genetic and part lifestyle changes for sure.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, genetics can definitely play a role. And something I even say too is, genetics load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day. And there's also epigenetics too, like our lifestyle, our stress levels, our sleep are going to turn various genes on and off. Now, I probably can't go into like the science part of all of that, but I do know like our genes do play a role, but there's so much that we can really, really do. And you mentioned exercise there too, different types of endurance exercise, but even strength training. Quite a bit too. Like I'm a bodybuilder. I'm not a bodybuilder anymore. I was a bodybuilder. No longer am. But the more skeletal muscle mass somebody has on their body, the more metabolically flexible they are, and they can actually tolerate more carbohydrates, and they have a greater level of insulin sensitivity. So they can actually sometimes have a bit more carbohydrates because muscle helps with glucose disposal overall. And sometimes even too, we're seeing more of an epidemic of even low skeletal muscle mass where people are very under muscled. They're not doing resistance training, not getting in enough high quality protein, and that can even lead to poor metabolic health.
Now I can see how, right before we record, you said you're best friends with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and I can see
very
why.
Aligned, yeah.
I can see the similarity of the notion here. It's like we do not have a fat problem. We have a lack of muscle.
She talks
problem.
about that all the time. Yeah, that's her area. But I think it's crucial, right, in terms of optimal health.
For sure.
It's optimizing the muscle.
I think because muscle cells are just very good at producing energy, because the whole reason of muscle is because we need the muscle to function, to have movement, to have resistance against certain load, certain weights. And by strength training, we are essentially giving the stimulus that our bodies need in order to say, hey, I am pushing harder and heavier, and therefore I need you to develop more muscle fibers in order for me to adapt for the next day, because I know it's coming. So I need to develop better so that I can adapt and create the energy that I need in order to push that squat, push that bench press, push that deadlift. And hence why it is so much better to have more lean muscle in order to pull in these substrates that are just flying around to create energy. Because if you think about it, nowadays in modern society, we are living in an abundance of foods, in abundance of snacks and hyper processed food and hyper palatable food, and we snack all the time. So it's very rare, especially in developed countries, for us to go through famine or for us to go through starvation period, unless you really want to go into intermittent fasting. Then that's by choice. But a lot of people, the problem is having the abundance of food, and that doesn't let your body and your hormones to go into in cycles. Like I said, the hormones get secreted and then it goes down and then it goes back up depending on the activity. Same thing with insulin. Insulin goes up when you eat, and it's supposed to go back down when you're going through fasted moments, when you're sleeping and whatnot, and then it goes back up when you refeed. But if you're constantly snacking, that throws the hormonal cycle into disarray, and therefore create that risk of developing insulin resistance, because there has to be some mechanism to counter that constant elevation of insulin, which the cells are going to do. The muscle cells are going to say, you are up all the time. I need to prevent myself from intaking too much glucose now because insulin is up all the time. So I think that's very important for people to know. It's like, not only we need to eat the right food, but also have the right training and have enough muscle cells in order to utilize the substrate that we put into our bodies.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of supporting skeletal muscle mass as being like one of the best things that you can do for optimizing, your metabolism overall, and then also nutrition. And before I dive into the nutrition side of everything, you mentioned there like snacking and intermittent fasting. I'm not a fan of snacking at all. And there used to be that myth of like, eat small meals constantly throughout the day and it's going to boost your metabolism. And I know that came from the thermic effect of food, whoever came up with that theory at the beginning of like, okay, if you're eating more, you're going to burn more because you're constantly keeping your digestive system going and breaking down food. But from what we're really seeing now today is like, we don't have a lack of food problem. Like, we have an overabundance food and we are overfed and undernourished in a lot of ways. And what's even more problematic is, I think it's over 30% of the calories that Americans ingest are not real whole food. They're industrial seed oils, vegetable oils, sugar, and processed foods. Yeah, those hyperpalatable foods. So we're overfed, we're undernourished, and this is what leads to a lot of the metabolic disease of what you're really, really talking about. So in terms of like intermittent fasting, would you say that is something that is beneficial? Because I've heard kind of mixed thoughts about it, or extended fasting even too.
I think it really depends on the person as well. And I think it really depends on your goal, right? I think intermittent fasting has certainly been shown to show a lot of benefit when it comes to autophagy, when it comes to longevity, so to a certain extent, when it comes to body composition, weight management. But there is a thing where people have been breaking their metabolism by doing too much. They're doing intermittent fasting, and then they're doing keto, and then they're doing high intensity interval training all at once, and you're not letting your body adapt to it, and you're not letting your body recover enough to the stimulus that you're providing it. And that is where the problem starts. So I think Cynthia Thurlow, we interviewed her on our HVMN podcast, and she, and is an expert in intermittent fasting. And she explained how, there was one time she basically did too much and she was in ICU. And she, even though she was following proper protocol and everything, but just it was the perfect storm when everything came together and then she fell ill. So you can do too much, right? And I think cycling different lifestyle interventions could also be a key here, like do intermittent fasting for like 3 months and then cycle it with like normal diet, and then maybe during that time increase the volume of your training so that you can have the nutrients in order for you to really push your training to the next level. And then when you're intermittent fasting, your body is saying like, I'm malnourished, so I'm gonna store everything instead of breaking down everything for energy, right? So think about how our bodies work and think about what stimulus you're providing your body. Are you telling your body, I'm fasting because I need you to do spring cleaning and clean up all these dead cells, toxins through autophagy? Or am I increasing my training volume to build muscle, but then I need nutrients, but then I'm fasting, so I don't have enough nutrients. So I'm going to start breaking down things I shouldn't be breaking down.
Yeah. It's kind of like the difference between short-term stressors that can be beneficial on the body versus chronic stressors on the body, which will be more detrimental than good. And I think, I think short-term fasting can be beneficial, like doing an extended fast here and there. But I think what a lot of people do is they hear something they think is beneficial, right? For losing fat. And you do put your body more in a calorie deficit for sure. So they lose the weight, they feel better. But over time, chronically fasting all the time and always having your body in a calorie deficit, not recovering, which is what you said there, can cause more harm than good. And I think part of the benefit of where we can really optimize our metabolism, our health, is being very flexible metabolically too. So I'd love it if you could speak to being metabolically flexible and what that means. Because I know for myself, like I go through periods of intermittent fasting. I go through periods where I'm trying to do, I call it a mini bulk, but I'd never really like gain weight, that much weight. But I bring my calories up. I eat as much as I can, which is real whole food. So I'm probably not like eating a ton. I try to push what I can in the gym. And then maybe I go through periods where I pull back. Sometimes I like to do a little bit more lower carbohydrate. So maybe I am getting into a little bit of ketosis, maybe not because my protein's a little bit higher. And then I'll go through periods where, when I'm trying to build, I'm upping a lot of my carbohydrates. So I've gone in all different directions with my diet. And I've also been able to maintain a very lean body composition for the last 10 years. Now, nowhere near as when I was competing in bodybuilding. I have no desire to be 10% body fat anymore. It was not healthy at all. But it's been pretty easy for me to maintain. And I feel like my body is very adapted to so many different ways of eating, as long as there's healthy food, real whole food, but different ways. And I feel like so often people get stuck on like, I can only do keto and that's the best diet. Or, you know what? I need to have high carbohydrates and low fat, or like just a certain type of diet. And I think the benefit that we can really speak to is how can we become more flexible and go into different macronutrient combinations based off of our goal and based off of what our body needs.
And I think cycling that, it's definitely beneficial for your body to adapt, and a little bit of a stressor for your body to adapt as well. And I think usually when you change your diet, that's when you see the most results, because your body is being stressed to a point that it needs to change and adapt to the new change. And also, before I go into the metabolic flexibility part, I want to add that if you're chronically in calorie deficit, it will also be really hard for you to put on muscle mass, because like I said earlier, first of all, you don't have enough nutrients to recover and adapt. But then second of all, you're also putting your body in chronic inflammation. Now, let me make this very clear that inflammation is not all bad. Inflammation is a signal that we need in order to, to adapt to a certain stressor, right? So if we have invasion from bacteria, virus, we need inflammation to let the rest of the body knows that there is a foreign invader. We need to fight it off. Same thing with changing lifestyles. We will upregulate the cortisols and the stress hormones, but that's a good thing if it's in a short time, because then you're telling a short amount of time that the body needs to adapt, needs to get better, needs to build more muscle, needs to be more antioxidative. But then over a long time, when your body can't keep up with that adaptation, that's when the damage occurs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then in terms of metabolic flexibility, like you said, it's the ability of our body to be able to switch substrates when we need that particular substrate in a particular situation. So the way I explain because a lot of people ask me, what is metabolic health? Because again, metabolic health is also a term that has been thrown around quite a lot. And the way I see metabolic health is how metabolically flexible we are. It basically, if you're going low intensity exercise, are you able to tap into your fat storage? Because that's what humans primarily use in a low intensity exercises. And when you go for anaerobic exercises, when you are sprinting, are you able to tap into your glycogen stores and your glucose storage when you're doing that? That is metabolic flexibility, right? And when you are, on ketogenic diet, are you able to be keto adaptive and use that fat and break it down into ketones for your body? Most people, yes, they can, because if you deplete your body of glucose, i.e. either you're intermittent fasting or ketogenic or on a ketogenic diet, you will break down the fats to produce ketones, because that's what our brains need. Most people don't understand what ketones are. Ketones are what we produce in our body when we are low on carb storage. And the whole reason is because of the blood-brain barrier. When we have glucose, the brain uses primarily glucose. But when we don't have glucose, fats cannot bypass the blood-brain barrier. It's just a layer of epithelial cells that prevent big molecules from bypassing the blood-brain barrier and enters the brain for energy. So since the brain cannot use fats and then glucose is low, the brain needs energy, right? It cannot stop working. Same with the heart. And that's why we are designed to break down fats into ketones in our livers when we are in this type of situation. And that's why we talk a lot on HVM podcast, like how the heart and the brain prefers ketones, and ketone is the preferred fuel, because whenever they are available, these organs chomp up these ketones like no other, independent of the intake of other substrates. So it doesn't turn down the other substrates. It's essentially giving these organs just more energy. And this is especially important in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, heart failures, where there is a deficiency or energy deficit in these organs. That's where ketone plays a big role. And that's why so many studies right now is ongoing using ketones to essentially try to mitigate those energy deficit damage that's being done in these diseases.
Yeah, I have so many questions here.
Yes. I opened a whole can of worms.
I know. It was awesome. I love it. In terms of metabolic flexibility, how does someone become more metabolically flexible overall?
I think
that's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. So if you're already healthy, you should be already metabolically flexible. So I think the problem is the 88% of Americans who are metabolically unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
Then how do
insulin
you
resistant, so overweight, not exercising. So if you're someone who's exercising, you're doing weight training, you're at a good healthy body composition, you're probably metabolically flexible.
Correct. Exactly. So how do you then address these metabolically unhealthy individuals to increase metabolic flexibility? One sure way to increase insulin sensitivity is exercise. That has been shown very, very solidly. Exercise increases insulin sensitivity, and that automatically increases your ability to switch over to glucose when you need to, especially when you're doing high intensity exercise. And then body composition, that's another thing you mentioned, right? Having high body fat content, and especially peripheral visceral fat content, that also increases risk of developing insulin sensitivity, because Dr. Ben Bikman talks about this a lot on insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance, on how the increase in fat tissues, either via number of fat cells or the size of fat cells, it leaks out these adipokines, which is inflammatory signaling markers that creates the cascade of event that then cause insulin resistance. So it's almost, like everything works together. Good diet, good exercise, decreasing your body fat content, and having a healthy body composition. And then in all of that, your stress and sleep management has to be as dialed in order to complement this healthy lifestyle. I think all of those components have their own parts to play, because you can't just say, as a scientist, it was, when I first studied metabolism and physiology, it was so easy for me to say, oh, just exercise, because exercise increase insulin sensitivity, right? Because in science, when you're a researcher, you are so used to the concept of having one constant, or having everything as a controlled environment, and having one variable, and just change that, and therefore you can see the effect of that one variable. In this case, exercise. So everything else, just forget about it and just exercise. But then the more I learn about metabolism, the more I learn about practicality of these advisors, is that human lives are much more complicated than that. We are much more complicated than a clinical trial or a study that is published. The whole reason of science and publications is to figure out that mechanism of action. But then when it comes to translation into our everyday lives, and that's why I love my job right now, because I am translating all the science into something that people can take away and practice in their own lives, is that there are more variables than we think that is affecting our decision to work out, our mood, our energy level, our motivation level, everything that's connected between the gut and the brain, for example, the things that we eat. And even though we have the calories that we need, for example, we're eating the right number of calories, but then if the quality of food, and they're not whole foods, they're hyper processed, it's going to affect one way or another over long term our mood, our fat deposition, our insulin sensitivity. So having, a lot of people are like, wow, that's too overwhelming because there's so many things. But then if you think about it, that's what you do every day. You wake up, you eat, you move, and then you rest. I mean, that's already things that we do. It's not that overwhelming. It's just a matter of being more aware of every single thing that you do. Yeah. How do you move? How do you rest? How often do you move? And how intense do you move? And then nowadays we are lucky that we have so many different devices that gives us that input. Our sleep quality, Oura Ring, we have Fitbit, we have Apple Watch, how many steps we've taken for the day, how much exercise, like what sort of intensity, we can measure our heart rate, what cardio zone we are in. So you don't even have to guess anymore. You can literally just measure them and work with people like yourself, experts who have that sort of expertise to train people, to tell them, to give them advice on what to eat, how much to eat. I think those are the important parts where, you just start with one thing and then it slowly falls into place, and then you start living a healthy lifestyle, and then you will see your metabolic flexibility increase drastically. And then you also feel mentally, I think one thing that I realized that a lot of people oversee, including myself in the past, is the mood and mental state and the mindset. Because it's so intangible, it's not measurable, that we oversee it. But when you're starting to see results, when you're starting to improve your body composition, when you're starting to increase your metabolic flexibility, you will realize and you will notice the change in your mood, your mindset, the positivity that comes with it. And I think that is the most powerful motivator, the most powerful driver for you to keep on that track and even improve it even further.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it all comes back to our mental state, right? And that's what really leads us to want to create the change in the first place. And I think, there's so many, like you said, tracking devices and all of that. And I'm a fan of some of them. I think some of them can definitely be great. I had an Aura ring for a while. And honestly, I got rid of it after a while because I was like, you know what? If I really check in with myself and I can tune in with myself, I know the answer. Am I fatigued or am I not fatigued? Am I prioritizing sleep? Am I not prioritizing sleep? Am I doing the things that I need to do to take care of myself? Am I eating real whole food? Am I eating food that loves me back, that makes me feel good? Or am I doing those things? Am I moving my body? How is my mental health? What does that look like? And I think, for somebody who's really, really struggling in their life and they have symptoms, right? I think that's why working with a practitioner, a coach, getting the testing done, monitoring a lot of these things can be so beneficial. And it's why I do functional medicine, right? Because sometimes we feel like we're doing everything right. You're like, okay, I think I'm eating the right diet. And there's so many different diets out there and nutrition advice these days. Even, we demonize animal protein and meat, and then we prioritize eating more processed foods. But there's so much different information, and someone can feel like they're doing everything right, but there's still, symptoms, whether it is chronic fatigue all the time, whether it's gut issues. I work with a lot of women who have chronic gut issues. Whether it is, our mental health as well too. And I think what's great about testing is it can identify those areas that maybe we need to hyper focus on a bit more. Maybe there is something that's off with your gut. Maybe you have insulin resistance. Maybe you have a hormonal imbalance. Maybe your quality of sleep is really poor. I think for a lot of people, there's typically a combination of the two or multiple of these things that are really going on and that are off and creating some of these symptoms. But, it really does come back to still like, are we doing the things that we need to do to really show up for ourselves and to take care of ourselves? And I think very often, we don't take enough time to even really check in with ourselves and ask ourselves that question. Do we live in a world that's high striving and driving and doing, and we don't spend a whole lot of time as a human being and really tuning in with ourselves and asking ourselves, I'm like, am I okay? How am I mentally? How do I feel every single day? And it's some of these questions that can really help, I think, make clear, okay, I need to get help. I need to get coaching. I need to get some testing done, or I need to start prioritizing different things overall in my life. Mental health and the mindset is something that I talk about a lot, even though I'm a functional medicine nutritionist, because I know that change can't come from anything if it doesn't come from our mind first and foremost. The way we relate to ourselves, the views that we have of ourselves, how we're taking care of ourselves, the mindset part of everything there. So it really does start there, which then dominoes in all of these other areas, which I can relate to when you say that, there's so much data and testing out there, but it really does come back to the mind. Yeah. It really does come back to a lot of these different areas. And for me, I'm super passionate about too, of how can we even optimize, our mental health? How can we optimize our performance? I'm a high achiever. I run a business. I do a lot of those things. So, even in terms of that,
so many of you guys know my story of losing my health, dealing with hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues, depression, anxiety, and gut issues that were so severe. I almost had my entire large intestine removed, and Western medicine completely failed me. They gave me trash can diagnosis like IBS, depression, gave me a bunch of medications. And, if I wouldn't have taken my health in my own hands today, I would be without an entire organ, like literally. And that's why I created what I wish I had, what I needed, a holistic mind and body approach, a functional medicine approach that said, why do we have this problem in the first place? And what can we do to restore function? This is the difference between thriving instead of just surviving and managing your symptoms. So if you're somebody who is sick and tired of being sick and tired, dealing with stubborn gut issues or hormonal imbalances or weight loss that you feel like is not moving anywhere, or thyroid issues and autoimmune condition, there is hope. There is another approach. And me and my team of registered dietitians, we want to help you. We want to be the support there for you. We want to do the functional medicine lab testing, look at your gut, your hormones, your thyroid, your adrenals, deficiencies, toxins that you can have in your body, get to know what you're doing with your nutrition, look at your lifestyle, look at your previous medical history, and help you create a customized plan to not just only heal, but get to the best health of your entire life. So if you're somebody who's ready to take a root cause approach to healing and step into the best version of you, fill out our application on our website, rachelscheer.com, and book a free 30-minute call. Absolutely free to do this call. Our goal on this call is to better get to know your goals and how this approach may work for you. So click the link in the show notes and book a free call if you would like to learn more.
When somebody is, let's say, metabolically healthy, are there certain things that they can do to even get that much better, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, before I go there, I've got 2 comments on what you just said. And one is, with regards to the devices that you said, and, if you listen to your body, you should be able to tell. But there are some people, if they are already metabolically unhealthy, and if they are already unsynced with their body, it'll be a good way to calibrate how you feel versus objective data. So I think those devices can be used that way. Like you said, you used it and then you don't need it anymore because generally how you feel and you're consistent about your lifestyle choices. So it's easier for you to figure out. And then the second comment is that I always tell people is that one person that we always forget to be kind to is often ourselves. So it's checking into ourselves. And I think, being, as you said, high achiever or always striving to be better, we forget that in the process of striving to be better, we always leave behind the debris that comes with it, all the wastage that comes with it, all of the stress that comes with it. We tend to push it aside because we don't have time, for this side quests. We need to, to have our eyes on the prize. But it's very important to check in with ourselves every now and again, for sure, and just ask ourselves, are we doing okay?
Yeah.
But to your question, is it even possible to optimize and get even better? And I think the answer lies within, is my foundation solid enough? So when I talk about foundation, we're talking about just simple nutrition, activity, sleep, stress management, all those foundation or relationship with people. If the foundation is solid, then you can start working on optimizing it, right? Supplements, on top of nutrition. Always prioritize the whole foods, always prioritize your macros, and you get your micronutrients from the whole foods as well. And then, are there any supplements out there? I mean, I personally use Ketone-IQ. I use exogenous ketones, not only because I work for the company, I genuinely believe in it, because I follow the literature around what exogenous ketones can do in terms of cognitive performance as well as physical performance. And then, sleep, then you can look at other things like, mattresses. Certain mattresses may,
I just got a new one.
Yeah. Where do you get yours from?
I got a Tempur-Pedic, but it's hard.
It
was so soft in this store. They say it takes 3 months to break in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I mean, I haven't experimented a lot with mattresses because they're very expensive. All right, like good mattresses are expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with what I have right now. But then I know Andrew Huberman, on his podcast, he talks about like the mattress that he believes in it and all of that. And I think 8 Sleep is also quite famous for really like tailoring to your needs. But they're also like $3,000, I think, mattresses.
Mine was like $7.
Yeah, it can be like, I'm not saying.
I tried to dial in, like, you should see my sleep routine. Like, honestly, I got like the white noise, I got the blackout curtains, I got the earplugs, I have the
Yep.
mattress, I have the weighted blanket, I got it all. So
See,
like I am
that's what I'm
all
saying.
about it.
That's what I'm talking about optimization, right?
Yeah.
Because once you know where your sleep stands, you're already like mostly in optimal level. How else can you increase it? You know, like you said, blackout curtain. Like we know that if you are completely blacked out during your sleep, even when they were talking about using eye mask, and if there's a little bit of light versus have an eye mask, when people wake up, they have better cognition. So they have tested that. And
With the eye mask?
with the eye mask. So anything that's blackout are really like,
yeah, like in a cage,
giving your body the signal that it needs in order to be in full like deep sleep. So the sleep, there is activity. So then we talk about exercise, like how else can you, especially for people who have been working out for a long time, yes, you have all those experience over these years, but then your body is also used to certain type of workouts. Then that's when you either you do your own research or you sign up for a coach, and then you vary the activities or the exercise that you do in order to achieve whatever goal you set for yourself, right? You want to have higher muscle mass, lower body fat, whatever you want, or just maintain. If you're doing maintenance, like what sort of calories you have to take in. I think there are a lot of areas to optimize all these different metrics once you get your foundation dialed in. But I think most people, the problem is they put the cart before the horse, and they are already working on the optimization when the foundation is not even solid yet. If they're already having crappy sleep, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to do all of these biohacks, and then I'm going to improve. Like, think about what is causing you the bad quality sleep. If it's stress, if it's noise, if it's the surrounding that you're in, like think about those first, and then buy the $7,000 mattress, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I work with a lot of people too who come to me, and they do all the testing that my practice does. And, we work with people who want to optimize. We'll work with people with a lot of issues. And in terms of like testing, it's really the same. Yeah, I even tell them that. It's just like some people have symptoms, the other people don't have symptoms, but we're just kind of fine tuning, and we're trying to maybe dial in hormones and gut health and blood sugar levels just a little bit more, but they're without symptoms, versus the person over here is walking in and they have gut issues. They're struggling with fatigue, insomnia, whatever the core issues may be. And we're trying to figure out what the root cause of that is. So, just to highlight what you said there, it's okay. If you have symptoms, if you have things that are off, you're struggling with, your sleep or your body composition, it's important to get that in a good place first before you really step into a lot of these other things, right? Because it's easy to like the biohacking things are sexy. They're fun, like they're enticing, right? To look into a lot of it. I love it. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Like, for me, some of the biggest things I like to look into is like optimizing like memory and mental capacity, because for me sometimes with the work that I do and being a high performer, I get very, very run down quite a bit throughout the day. And I know I'm curious of even learning a little bit more about your ketones, because I know that can play a role. And I'm like waiting. I'm like, it's kicking in here because I know you don't like.
I know you don't like the taste. I know you don't like the taste, and a lot of people don't like the taste either. But in our study, so I'm also principal investigator for our $6 million contract with the DoD, with the military. So we looked at using ketones for cognitive and physical performance in hypoxia, which is low oxygen environment, like high altitude, and we saw improved reaction time as well as improve memory recall. So that's very important. So for me, anecdotally, I've been taking it for more than a year and a half now, and I definitely feel I can recall certain things much better, especially during podcasts. So one really stark example that I can pull up is, as we're talking, for example, you are explaining your stuff and then you ask a question. Before I go on to the answer, I have two comments to comment on what you just said. So I remember what I want to say. I said it, and then I can still go back to the question and answer what I wanted to answer. That was a bit of a challenge before, especially if you pile up like 5 different things and you're like, okay, where was my train of thought? But Ketone-IQ has actually helped me a lot when it comes to that in podcasting, because now that I'm hosting HVM and podcasts, I do a lot more podcasts that it puts me in a state where I'm like, I'm very clear. I can almost see them like, okay, this is this part of the segment that we're discussing, and then we're going to this segment, and then I can just pull from either or.
That's awesome for sure. In terms of like the ketone drink here, I'd love it if you can explain a little bit about diet with this, because from what I understand is you don't have to be on a ketogenic diet to be able to do the ketones.
That is correct. So for the longest time in human history, the only way for us to have ketones in our bodies is via starvation, intermittent fasting, ketogenic diet, when we severely restrict carb intake and really deplete our carb storage in our body. Only then our bodies will start breaking down fats into ketones. That's the only way, because there are no foods that directly provide us with ketones. There are foods, however, that increases the rate of producing ketones, like MCT oil, like coconut oil. It does increase the production, but not as high. And for reference, if you're not on ketogenic diet or not in ketosis, generally your ketone levels is between 0 to 0.1 millimolar in your blood. And if you are in ketosis, the definition is anything above 0.5 millimolar. And MCT oil in studies have shown to increase your ketone levels up to 0.5. And in 2017, HVMN brought to the market the first ketone ester. And that was the first molecule that is able to increase our blood ketone levels up to 3 to 5 millimolar. So that's a huge increase. But then over the years, more studies came out and show that if you spike your blood pH be that high, you also lower your blood pH and you increase blood acidity. And as a result, for athletes who are using it for performance, they found themselves working out harder. So they have a higher rate of perceived exertion because they are trying to breathe harder to expel the carbon dioxide in the body to neutralize the blood. So what Ketone-IQ is we took half of what ketone ester was. So ketone ester is half beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone, bound with butanediol in an ester bond. That's why it's called ketone ester. We took half of that, which is butanediol, and made it a drink. Reason being, one is cheaper to produce, so it's more accessible to people, because previously ketone ester cost $40 for like 25 grams. Now it's $10. Two, it's easier to flavor. So as I said earlier, as much as the taste is not like soda, it tastes significantly better.
Like? It's hard to even describe.
So people describe ketone ester taste as rocket fuel, jet fuel.
I don't know what that tastes like.
Battery acid. Nobody knows what that tastes like. But when you taste ketone ester, you know how awful that was. And then
I still would rather do a shot of this than a real shot, though, I have to say.
There you go. And then the third point is because butanediol goes through your liver and converts it into BHB, so beta hydroxybutyrate, which is your blood ketones. Because your liver is doing the work, your liver is also having signal from the rest of your body, so it acts as a gatekeeper, so it wouldn't go so high. The highest we have achieved was 2.5 millimolar, which is perfect, because right now the therapeutic and performance threshold is between 1 to 2.5 millimolar from what the studies are showing. So anything more than that may not be beneficial, but instead it might be detrimental because of the increase in blood acidity. So that's the reason why we came up with this. And a lot of athletes and marathoners actually switched over from ketone ester to Ketone-IQ these days because they like the effect more.
What would you say is the biggest things people will notice taking Ketone-IQ?
So a lot of people ask this. Yeah, so a lot of people ask this. It's like, what should I feel? So do note that this, when we talk about Ketone-IQ, I would say anything, in terms of use case, anything that uses your brain, you will see the benefit.
Everything.
Exactly. Everything. So you exercise, you need your brain. You do podcasts, you need your brain. You do an exam, you need your brain. So all of that you will get benefit from. So in terms of what will you feel, It's a subjective feel of mental clarity. You will literally feel very focused. So I've got friends who've taken it for ADHD, and they said for the first time ever, they are able to study for hours long because they would never able to do that before. So it's that focus and that in the zone feeling, but also note that this is not a stimulant. So you will not, so a lot of people, when we talk about brain energy, when we talk about energy, they often associate with caffeine because that's what we know. And that's what, in America, I've realized you guys drink coffee like water.
We love our coffee.
Yeah, seven coffees a day. I'm like,
no,
one coffee a day would give me a headache.
One, for me.
Yeah, people who like I know who would, oh, I drink like 6 coffees a day. I'm like, how?
And their adrenals are messed up.
So do you know that this is not a stimulant? So you won't get that jittery feeling, you won't get the anxiety feeling, and you won't get that feeling where you want to punch a hole in the wall. It's a very subtle, gentle energy, because people often feel they're more alert, more awake, especially after lunch. If they take it just for the afternoon lull, they feel like they can focus more. And for me, the memory and the cognitive ability to follow a conversation while also giving a much more coherent explanation of a complicated subject, because that's what I do a lot, right? Translating a very complicated science paper into something that people can understand. Granted, I am still learning. We all are always learning. There are certain times where I forget, people don't understand what certain scientific terms are, but is the ability to slow down and connect my brain to my mouth, because most of the time it doesn't match the speed, right? It's either your brain moves faster than your mouth, or your mouth trying to, have a word diarrhea, and then your brain can't follow.
What did I just say? I think my mouth talks before my brain sometimes.
So hopefully this will help you. So that's what people can feel. So it's not like that jittery feeling, but you do feel the energy. Two things that I want to point out though. One is, if you're taking it at rest, like what we're doing right now, just sitting around having a Ketone-IQ for work, for example, you might feel a slight appetite suppression effect. So you won't feel hungry. You have the energy. So some people use it for intermittent fasting, because it shouldn't break your fast, because one, it doesn't increase insulin at all, and two, it's only 70 calories. And from the from the fast mimicking diet studies, they have up to like 500 to 750 calories, and that still induce autophagy. So 70 calories should be nothing. And then another point is that usually an hour after taking exogenous ketones, if you have a continuous glucose monitoring, you will see a drop in glucose, in blood glucose, which a study in Canada, they use it as an advantage, because these are for obese people and diabetic patients that they take ketones after food, and their blood glucose is being controlled much better. So depending on how you use it, if you are at risk of hypoglycemia most of the time because your metabolism is too good, then I would take notice of that. And if you feel like cold or whatever, one dose usually won't do anything really for in terms of the feel of hypoglycemia. But for some athletes who take more than one doses,
people are pretty lean. Yeah. I've been there before when I was at 10% body fat. Hypoglycemia all the time.
Right. Yeah, and you just like shiver, right?
Yeah, I'll get like shaky and I wouldn't know why. Yeah. So, but now I know what that is, and selfishly, this has been awesome, very helpful for me too, because I'm going to start making this like my podcast speaking prep overall for things that I do. And I might even, it'd be cool to do this and then jump in the ice bath, because typically my midday break, so like I'll get a little bit of a low, and then instead of doing a cup of coffee, like my new thing is just I jump in, I call like my espresso shot ice bath. So I only do like a minute instead of like the full 3 minutes that typically is recommended, but it wakes me up. And then from there, I'll just kind of like ground my nervous system, but I'm ready to like, all right, take a little bit of a break, step back into work, podcast, all of that, versus just like taking like a mindless break between, lunch or things like that.
That's
Doing
another
this
thing,
with an
right?
ice bath. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you have caffeine like past like 3 p.m. or whatever, because it has half-life of like at least 6 hours or more, and if you have more, then people will find that it will affect their sleep, whereas ketones, it doesn't. So that's also another advantage over caffeine. And yes, we've done quite a few events actually in LA with ice baths and like in conjunction using it for ice bath. And another really good effect of ketone is that it's anxiolytic, so it's relaxation. So people are like, how can you market something for performance, for exercise, and also at the same time relaxation? I said it's because it's energy for your brain, so it really helps with, it's just a calorie, it gives you energy, so it can be for performance, but at the same time the relaxation doesn't mean that you just go into a slump.
Doesn't mean sleepy. It's
exactly you're just
calm nervous system.
Correct. You're not just like all the time. You're not like yelling all the time. You're not at 110% all the time. So that relaxation helps with some people when they take it. Like some people take it before bed. Some people, like you said, take it before ice bath and have that calmness and that breathing in the ice bath, and might help you.
What I'm going to do this with 200 milligrams of L-theanine ice bath breath work.
Yeah.
And then I'll check in with you. Let me know.
Yes, absolutely.
How I feel. Then I'll be the meditative stack to like calm nervous system.
I use L-theanine, magnesium glycinate, melatonin, and ketones when I need to for sleep. If I chill out. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. This has been incredibly helpful. I could pick your brain for hours, and you're just fun to talk to as well. But where can people find more about you? Website, learn more about Ketone-IQ if they want to optimize their mental health, their recovery, their exercise. I mean, anything that has to do with the brain.
Yes, they can find me at Latt Mansor, LattMansor, on all social media, or at HVMN to find out about the company on all social media as well. And also head over to our website, www.hvmn.com, for any additional information, because we have a lot of blogs and podcasts, and HVMN podcast is available on all podcast platforms as well, and as well as YouTube. So I would, we will have Rachel soon as well.
Yes.
We'll have all experts such as Rachel to talk about their experience and their expertise. And I love talking to people like you who have hands-on experience with people, because coming from a science background, I'm always in the lab, right? I'm looking at animal models, I'm looking at cells, I'm looking at mechanism of action, biomolecular mechanisms, but you help me translate that knowledge to practical advice, and that our audience, audience can then take and follow through. So feel free to check me out, follow us, and happy to help. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
We'll put all of those links there in the show notes, along with the Ketone-IQ link if you guys want to get a purchase of that. Just take it like a shot. It's awesome though. I seriously feel a lot more mentally clear here.
And I believe you have a discount code as well from if not, I'll make sure you do.
We'll put it in the show notes. I'm not sure of it if I have one, but check the show notes. If there's a discount code there, use the discount code for the Ketone-IQ. And if you guys got value out of today's episode, do me a favor, take a screenshot, share it on your Instagram, tag Latt Mansor, tag Scheer Madness Podcast and Rachel Scheer, and share us what your big takeaways are. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been Scheer Madness.